the source material isn't recognizable anymore. Why don't they just make it their own thing? Because every time someone tries to do that, it gets bashed as thinly veiled derivative fanfiction, which gives corporations more excuses not to make their own stuff. All while these snobs hypocritically support creators who do the exact same thing they complain about. Well, I myself am not happy the way big entertainment corporations have been tampering around with other franchises that I've come to love and the legitimate complaints about them. One thing I've noticed is one of those major complaints is the source material is now unrecognizable, and why didn't these guys just make their own thing instead of rebooting and reimagining stuff? And as much as I agree with that sentiment, I think there's an understandable reason why that is. And that comes from my experience with people complaining about reimagined AUs in the fanfiction sphere. Every time someone tried to do some reimagined fanfiction AU, it was often met with a lot of people complaining how, this is unrecognizable anymore. Why don't you make it its own thing? And the reason why that is because these very same snobs will set these creative people up into this conundrum. Now, if you make a reimagined AU fanfiction, the snobs will say it's unrecognizable to the source material and should be its own thing, right? If you try to make it its own thing, especially when you try to combine other elements so it is more original, it'll get reduced to its inspirations in this greedy reductionism, or as what C.S. Lewis would call nothing buttery. And the snobs will say this is a derivative, thinly veiled AU fanfiction that was written by someone who was butthurt and is trying to change the canon of the source material and its trajectory. And they should disengage with the source material, use something else, and learn to be more original. So if you try to be original and not derivative, and you just let that be defined by these people who just move the goalposts around, you're just left your creativity being manipulated, and you're just dancing around for a bunch of snobs like a monkey.
Shut up and dance!
Uh-oh. And they often top it off with the fact the motivation was out of disagreement and distaste as hostile. And the most infuriating thing about all this is that these very same people are guilty of hypocrisy. Let me give a recent example with my favorite superheroine, Common America and the Common Core, created by Timothy Lim and Mark Pellegrini at Iconic Comics. Now, Common America was created by Tim and Mark's disagreement of the handling of Captain Marvel, combined with elements of Sailor Moon and various tokusatsu. This in turn pissed off a lot of people, screeching that Carly Vander's was nothing more than a porno Captain Marvel ripoff because Mark and Tim dared to actively disagree with the concept of Captain Marvel through a creative work. They basically reduced Carly down to her inspiration and then made it sound stupid, even though Carly and her core have evolved way past than just being a Captain Marvel parody. Yet the strange thing is, those people who were bashing Common America for being a derivative porno Captain Marvel ripoff had also been the same people rooting for Homelander in The Boys, who's basically an evil Superman. Created by a guy who has said things about superheroes which are the textbook definition of hostile, which the snobs justify it with, well, that made the concept of Superman and superheroes in general more interesting.
Just fucking, you know?
And as for the OG counterpart of my Ruby AU, Saints of Remnant, when I was throwing some ideas around, in my earlier days on the internet, I got criticized because it came from a place of dissent, had characters inspired from John Arc and Pierre Nikos, Sun Wukong and Blake Belladonna, and Weiss Schnee and Neptune Vasilius, but not ending tragically. And not to mention it has Christian themes in it, and I got labeled it as a thinly veiled Christian propaganda butthurt fanfiction of Ruby. And just like with Common America, those very same people were also supporting something like the anti-Narnia, His Dark Materials trilogy, written by Philip Pullman, who has said the most nasty things about Christianity and C.S. Lewis, and has gotten an award and knighted. And once again, well, he made the concept more interesting. So breaking it down, these are okay because they make concepts more interesting, and these are not okay because they are derivative. This is okay, this is not okay, this is okay, this is not okay. Rules for thee, but not for me, and do as I say, but not as I do.
You hypocrites.
So you make a reimagined AU fanfiction, there'll be those who'll go out of their way to nitpick at it and say, it's so unrecognizable to the source material. You tweak it up and combine elements to make it its own thing, it gets reduced to their inspirations and is called derivative thinly veiled fanfiction. And if it's out of dissent, it's called thinly veiled butthurt fanfiction. So basically, the snobs aren't going to let you win. You're going to get criticized no matter what you do, so you might as well make a choice and just stick with it. Or maybe try to do both if you can. Because if you let these people define what is original and what is derivative and what isn't or is okay, or what is pleasing everyone and what is not pleasing everyone, once again, you're just dancing around like a monkey. And often they justify all this with a whole, well, we know better than you, so it's different when it's us attitude. And this can be reflected in multiple fandom scenarios besides this, but this is primarily about the hypocrisy of calling things derivative or unrecognizable to source material. Now, when it's the latter case of an OG work that recycles material and someone points it out being derivative, but is like, here's what you can do to tweak it a little bit so it's even more original, I don't mind that. I don't mind when someone points it out and they're like, and here's how you can fix it. But other times it's just a bunch of snobs who are just sore that a wrong person, whether they're the minority of freaks and vermin or the unwashed masses, actively disagrees with something they like through a creative work, and they decide to lecture them for it. Back in the earlier days, I was lectured 1,000 times by Ruby loyalists how offensive my AU is and how they don't like that I'm actively disagreeing with Monty's vision. And when I pointed out I wasn't the only one who felt this way, and not saying those who shared my feelings were bigger than them, just big enough, the snobs proceeded to mouth off at that said potential audience.
This community means about as much to me as a festering ball of dog snot.
They would call them cowards, weaklings, idiots, uncultured swine, who can't think for themselves, let alone feel for themselves, and how these snobs just basically couldn't stand such wrong people breathing the same air as them.
If you took their combined IQ and multiplied it by 100, you might have enough intelligence to tie your shoe, if you didn't drool all over yourself first.
The right people are objective by default with whatever they think, feel, and say, and they can basically just do whatever they want, while us wrong people need to follow all these rules and regulations and need to be told what to feel, and what to think, and what to find interesting, and what not to find interesting, and how to create. Because all of our thoughts and feelings are full of subjective feelings, and subjective this, and subjective that. So we are subjected to the objective will of the right people.
Do as I command!
No! And what's even worse is this gives big corporate entertainment who have the wealth and resources to withstand such blowback to point to the little guy who's getting the brunt of all this and go, see, this is why we don't make original material and we just reboot pre-existing franchises. All of this is done at the expense of the little guy.
None of this costs you fucking anything.
And these snobs keep complaining about fan fiction and big entertainment tampering out with pre-existing franchises, and they fail to see that they are a contributing factor to the problem, and that they're playing into the hands of the very people they're complaining about.
Who killed Hannibal? Who killed Hannibal?
Now, I'm not saying this is the primary problem. Countless of other people have pointed out the primary source for all this corporate fuckery. But from my understanding, these snobs certainly haven't helped matters. Because if you're a person who can't humor any of these things, and what you saw with their inspired concepts to be the end-all, be-all, and anything else to be derivative, thinly veiled fanfiction, then I have a question for you. Why?
Oh, what?
Do you care so much what us ignorant peons are doing? I mean, what are you even doing here in the first place? Whatever we do is ultimately meaningless and worthless garbage that just dopes us up like drugs and won't change canon or its trajectory. So what are you even doing inserting yourself into this discussion at all, since you yourself are so above and beyond all that?
What do you give a shit anyway?
By your own logic, what we do is ultimately of no consequence to you. And with your minds made up, you've pretty much disqualified yourself from being part of these discussions. So why do you need to go out of your way to open your mouth? You're better off just gossiping about us in your little online country clubs and keeping it there and not trying to start anything. All as you harumph to one another in congratulation of being so morally, culturally, intellectually superior to everyone else.
Harumph, 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 harumph. I didn't get a harumph out of that guy.
Give the governor a harumph.
Harumph!
You watch your ass.
If you truly believe what you preferred for these concepts is the objective end-all be-all, and you can't humor anything else, then save yourself the time and energy and stay out of our business. Because all you're just doing is getting in the way and doing harm to the very cause you claim to support, and all in the favor of those you claim to be against.
You're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Quit being part of the fucking problem and put the other guy back on.